No ship was supposed to enter the Orion Dead Zone. The region had been marked on every star chart for over 8,000 years. Navigation systems automatically rerouted around it. Military patrols avoided it. Even smugglers and pirates refused to cross its invisible boundary. There were no mines, no radiation storms, no black holes, just one warning attached to the coordinates. Quarantine order, origin, galactic concord. Reason, classified. Status, permanent. That was exactly why Captain Rylan Voss was there. The cargo ship Drifter's Luck dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder, its engines whining in protest as the stars snapped back into existence around it. Warning lights flickered across the cockpit. Rylan ignored them. He was the kind of man who had learned long ago that warnings and good judgment rarely shared the same room. His eyes were fixed on the view beyond the forward glass. A lone blue planet rotated slowly in the darkness. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, and after 8,000 years of quarantine, that made it feel like a wound that had never healed right. That's it. Lyra's voice came out flat and clipped, the way it always did when she was running the numbers and didn't like where they landed. She was already at her sensor console, fingers moving with the precise efficiency of someone who trusted data over instinct. That's the world they locked down for 8 millennia? Rylan didn't answer immediately. He studied the planet the way a gambler studied a loaded deck, looking for the trick hidden beneath the surface. Earth, he said quietly. Birthplace of humanity. Former core world. The most forbidden place in the galaxy. Behind him, someone laughed, half a beat too late, like he'd had to decide if it was funny first. That was Jax, the ship's engineer. Brilliant with machines. Terrible with silence. He filled it whenever he could. They say the humans wiped themselves out. Civil war, climate collapse, AI rebellion. Depends which archive you read. Official history, Lyra said, comes from the Concord. Rylan finally smiled. And the Concord, he replied, never lies, unless it has something to hide. The crew of the Drifter's Luck wasn't a military unit, or a research team, or anything respectable. They were scavengers, salvage from restricted zones, black market technology recovery, historical artifact extraction with no questions asked. Rylan was reckless and calculating in equal measure. Lyra was the conscience nobody listened to. Jax was always the last to understand why something was a bad idea, which made him either brave or dangerous depending on the day. If even one intact pre-collapse system is down there, Jax said, we're rich. Correction, Rylan said. If we survive long enough to sell it, we're rich. Lyra turned back to her console. I'm still not comfortable with this. The Concord didn't quarantine an entire species' homeworld for no reason. Exactly, Rylan said. That reason is what the buyers are paying for. The ship began its descent. Clouds parted as the Drifter's Luck entered Earth's atmosphere. Blue oceans stretched endlessly below. Vast green landmasses. Storm systems spiraling slowly across the surface. For a dead world, it looked very much alive. Atmosphere stable, Lyra reported. Biosphere active. No global damage. No radiation anomalies. She paused. That doesn't match the collapse records. No, Rylan agreed. It doesn't. The ship leveled out above the planet's largest ocean. Blue-green and endless. It stretched to every horizon like something that had decided the world belonged to it, and was simply waiting for everyone else to admit it. Coordinates locked, Lyra said. Her voice had gone careful. Target location is underwater. Rylan leaned forward. How deep? 7,000 meters. Silence filled the cockpit. Not the comfortable kind. Scanning now, she continued. And, Captain, you need to see this. The main display flickered, then resolved. Rylan had seen ruins across 40 systems. He had cataloged dead cities on 9 worlds. He had walked through the remains of civilizations that had burned themselves out before humanity learned to write. He had never seen anything that looked like it was still waiting for its builders to come home. The structure rose from the ocean floor in clean geometric lines. Towers like mountains, smooth black walls stretching farther than the sensors could measure, platforms arranged in concentric rings with a precision that felt intentional even after thousands of years. It didn't look ancient. It looked paused. Material composition unknown, Lyra whispered. No corrosion, no biological growth, no structural decay. Jax stared at the readings. That thing has been down there for thousands of years. Ryland's voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous tone. And it still looks new. Lyra enlarged one section of the display. A faint energy signature pulsed at the center of the structure. Weak, ancient, but active. Ryland felt it then, not excitement, not greed. Something older than either. Instinct. The feeling you get when you realize you're not exploring a ruin. You're approaching something that never died. Take us down, he said. The drifter's luck tilted forward and began its descent toward the dark ocean below. As the ship entered the water, external lights cut through the endless blue. Strange shapes moved in the distance, massive shadows gliding through the depths. The structure grew larger and larger until it filled the entire viewport. No damage, no collapse, no signs of abandonment, just silent black walls waiting in the darkness. Captain, Lyra said quietly, I'm detecting something new. Ryland didn't look away from the structure. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Internal systems just activated. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, deep inside the ancient structure, a second energy pulse moved, stronger this time, like a heartbeat. And somewhere far below the ocean floor, something began to wake. The ocean pressed against the hull as the drifter's luck descended deeper into the darkness. Up close, the structure's scale became overwhelming. Towers rose like mountains from the seabed. Smooth walls stretched farther than the ship's sensors could measure. It didn't look abandoned. It looked preserved. Depth holding, Jax reported. Hull pressure within limits. Energy readings are increasing, Lyra said. Whatever powered this place is still running. They found the entrance in the lower eastern sector, a massive section of wall that had split open sometime in the distant past. Not destroyed. More like a door that had partially separated and never closed again. Inside, darkness. An atmosphere. Internal pressure detected, Lyra said. Oxygen-nitrogen mix. Stable. Jax turned in his seat. You're telling me a sealed environment survived underwater for 8,000 years? I'm telling you, Ryland said quietly. This wasn't built to fail. As the ship crossed the threshold, the ocean vanished behind them. The chamber that opened around them was enormous, easily large enough to hold a fleet. The walls were lined with machinery and platforms layered in concentric patterns. Dust covered everything, but nothing was broken. Power signatures all around us, Lyra whispered. Dormant systems. Standby mode. This wasn't a ruin. This was a facility waiting for someone to return. Ryland stepped out first, boots echoing against the dark metal floor. The sound felt wrong, too clean, too sharp, like the acoustics of a place that had been sealed rather than simply left. His suit lights swept across smooth surfaces etched with symbols, some human languages, others completely unknown. Lyra and Jax followed. The air was still, too still. No airflow, no distant machinery noise, just silence. They moved deeper. Corridors stretched in perfect geometric lines. Doors stood open. Workstations remained exactly where their operators had left them. Chairs pushed back like someone had stood up in a hurry and simply never returned. On one desk, a small photograph printed on material that hadn't decayed. A family, smiling. Lyra looked at it for a long moment and didn't say anything. Captain, Lyra said softly as they walked. I'm picking up low-frequency signals. Data systems. Archives, maybe. Jax ran his scanner along a wall panel. Materials aren't in any database. Energy-resistant alloys. Self-repairing surface layer. This tech is way beyond anything the Concorde uses. Ryland stopped. Ahead, the corridor opened into a central chamber. Circular, with a ceiling that rose hundreds of meters above them. Rings of machinery lined the walls, each unit dark but intact. And in the exact center of the room stood a single structure. A platform. And on it, a capsule. Tall and transparent, filled with faint blue light. Frost-like patterns clung to the inner surface, slowly evaporating as internal systems warmed. Inside the capsule lay a man. Human. Young. Unarmed. Motionless. Lyra's voice barely formed words. That's impossible. Jax stared. Human stasis technology never lasted more than a few decades. Ryland stepped closer. The man looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep. But something about standing near him felt wrong. Not dangerous, not threatening. Just heavy, like standing too close to something powerful that hadn't decided whether to wake up yet. At the base of the platform, faint text glowed as dormant systems struggled to translate. Lyra activated her wrist interface. The symbols shifted and resolved into Old Earth Standard. She read aloud. Guardian Unit. Designation, Sentinel Prime. Jax frowned. Guardian? Military. Ryland's attention was on the small control panel on the side of the capsule. Its surface pulsed faintly. Active. Waiting. His entire career had been built on one rule. If something survived this long, it's valuable. He reached out. His finger hovered over the control surface. Captain, Lyra started. It was too late. The entire chamber shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling as systems across the room powered on. Lights flickered to life in expanding circles. Machinery that hadn't moved in 8,000 years began to hum. A voice filled the chamber. Calm. Artificial. Ancient. External contact detected. Threat analysis in progress. Guardian revival sequence initiated. The frost inside the capsule evaporated instantly. The man inside took a sudden, sharp breath. His chest rose. His fingers twitched. And slowly, his eyes opened. They were clear. Focused. Already looking directly at Ryland. For the first time since entering the structure, the captain of the Drifter's luck felt afraid. For a moment, no one moved. The chamber hummed with rising energy as ancient systems fully came online. Rings of light ignited along the walls. Data streams flickered across dormant consoles. The Guardian simply watched. His eyes moved slowly, one face to the next. Not the disorientation of someone waking from sleep. The assessment of someone already thinking 3 steps ahead. The capsule released a soft hiss. Seals disengaged. The transparent cover slid open. He sat up, swung his legs over the edge, stood. His movements were controlled, not weak the way long sleep makes people weak. But Ryland watched him closely and caught what he was suppressing. When the Guardian's eyes moved across the chamber, something crossed his face for one fraction of a second. Not confusion, not grief, the effort of not showing either. Then it was gone. He looked at his hands first, then his arms, then the chamber around him. His expression did not show confusion, only assessment. When he spoke, his voice was rough but steady. How long? Ryland swallowed. Approximately 8,000 years. The Guardian closed his eyes. Briefly, not in shock. The way you close your eyes when you already knew the answer and simply needed a moment before you could do what came next anyway. When he opened them again, they were sharper. Earth status. Lyra hesitated, then spoke. Biosphere stable. Population minimal. Pre-industrial tribal distribution across most continents. The Guardian nodded once. Galactic contact? Ryland answered. Yes. Multi-species civilization. Galactic Concord Authority. Something changed in the man's expression. Not anger. Not fear. Focus. Above them, the chamber lights shifted. A central console activated near the platform. Data projections filled the air, star maps, timelines, system reports. He walked toward it with the certainty of someone who had designed the room himself, his steps precise and unhurried. His fingers touched the controls. Data flooded the air. Historical records. Galactic expansion timelines. Concord governance structures. Human extinction reports. He read everything at impossible speed. The room was silent except for the sound of shifting projections. Then he stopped. One file remained open. Human collapse. Cause. Internal failure. For the first time, emotion appeared on his face. Not grief. Not sadness. Doubt. He turned slowly toward Ryland. That report is false, he said. Ryland stiffened. That's the official record. The man studied him for a long moment. Then he asked quietly, what actually happened to humanity? No one answered. Because no one knew. The Guardian looked back at the data. His hand moved across the console again. Hidden archives unlocked. Encrypted records surfaced. Restricted Concord files. Quarantine orders. Containment directives. Biological intervention logs. The truth assembled itself in the air. Silence filled the chamber as the Guardian read. When he finished, he did not speak immediately. His hands rested on the console. The room temperature seemed to drop. Finally, he said one word. They feared us. Ryland felt something cold settle in his chest. The Guardian continued, his voice controlled and measured. Human cognitive suppression virus. Targeted neural degradation. Global release authorized by Concord Emergency Council. Objective. Permanent technological regression. Lyra stared at the projections. She had been still for a long time, longer than Rylan had ever seen her stand still without moving toward a solution. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "They didn't just stop humanity," she said. "They reduced the entire species." Jax had turned away. He was looking at the wall. His hands were at his sides, and he wasn't saying anything. Nobody asked him what he was thinking. Nobody needed to. The Guardian remained still. Yes. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as power diverted elsewhere in the facility. Deep below them, massive systems began to activate. Rylan stepped forward. "What are you doing?" The Guardian's hands moved across the console. "Restoring planetary defense." The artificial voice responded immediately. "Command accepted. Earth defense grid activation sequence initiated." The entire structure trembled. Far above, beyond the ocean, hidden installations began to wake. Satellites powered on. Underground weapon arrays unlocked. Orbital platforms shifted position after 8,000 years of silence. Lyra's eyes widened. "You're bringing the whole system online." The Guardian looked at her. "Yes." Then he turned back to the console. A transmission signal formed. "Destination, Galactic Concord Network." "What are you sending?" Rylan asked. "A notification." He pressed the command. Across the galaxy, a message began to spread. Simple, direct, impossible to ignore. Guardian active. Earth defense grid online. Quarantine status terminated. The signal pulsed outward at faster than light speeds. In council chambers, in military command centers, in government archives where old records had been buried, ancient warnings triggered, and for the first time in 8,000 years, the galaxy remembered why Earth had been quarantined. The transmission had been active for less than 12 minutes when Lyra's console flashed red. "Incoming contact," she said sharply. "One ship. Kathari design. Military class." Rylan turned. Already, they were probably monitoring the dead zone. Quarantine breach alert triggered an automatic response. Jack swallowed. Military response for one signal? Rylan gave a dry laugh. "We just told the galaxy Earth's defenses are online. They're not coming to talk." Above the ocean, the Kathari cruiser dropped out of hyperspace. Its hull bristled with weapon arrays. Scanners immediately locked onto the energy surge rising from the structure below. On the cruiser's bridge, the commander issued a simple order: containment protocol. Surface strike authorized. Deep underwater, warning alerts appeared across the citadel. The Guardian finally looked up. "Estimated time to impact?" he asked. 30 seconds. Rylan stared at him. "You're not seriously staying down here." "Remain inside," he said. The liquid metal armor stored within the platform activated. It flowed upward like living mercury, wrapping around his body in seconds, forming a seamless silver surface that reflected the chamber lights. Helmet, torso, limbs. When the armor sealed, the artificial voice spoke. "Guardian combat systems online." The chamber ceiling opened. Above them, dark ocean water waited. Rylan took a step forward. "Wait, you're going up there? That's a warship." The Guardian looked back once. "Then they should leave." And then he jumped. He shot upward through the water like a missile, moving faster than the external sensors could track. 30 seconds later, the Kathari cruiser fired. A plasma strike dropped toward the ocean. Then the sensors on the cruiser screamed. "Contact. Unknown object approaching at high velocity." Something had burst out of the ocean. Not a ship. A figure, moving faster than any atmospheric craft. On the ship's security feeds, the breach happened too fast to follow in real time. Reviewed later, frame by frame. He entered through the outer hull, moved through the central corridor, and every armed soldier in his path was down in under 2 seconds. Unconscious, weapons destroyed, armor crushed just enough to disable. Not a single fatality. That part was important. That part was deliberate. He reached the reactor core and placed his hand against the control interface. Weapons offline. Engines offline. Life support stable. On the bridge, the commander stared at the status board. All systems disabled. The main display flickered. The Guardian was standing inside the reactor chamber, looking directly at the camera. Then the ship's internal communication system activated. His voice came through calm and clear. "You have violated a protected world. No further action will be taken if you depart immediately." Silence on the bridge. The tactical officer spoke quietly. "We can't fight that." The commander nodded. Full retreat. Deep below the ocean, Rylan stared at the sensor data in disbelief. "You shut down a warship alone." The Guardian returned through the chamber opening, armor reforming smoothly back into the platform storage. He looked exactly as calm as before. That was a warning, he said. Lyra swallowed. A warning? Yes. Because both he, and now the entire crew, knew something else. If a single patrol ship had arrived this quickly, the real response was already on its way. The emergency report reached the Galactic Concord within minutes. Then the transmission from Earth arrived. In the High Council chamber, a structure large enough to hold representatives from 10,000 worlds, the message repeated across every display. Some delegates didn't understand the significance. Others went very still. An elderly ORM-representative rose slowly from its crystalline seat. Its voice carried across the chamber like chimes in cold air. That designation should not exist. It called for restricted history, Layer 7. Guardian conflict records. The chamber AI hesitated. The ORM-invoked a founding council override. Ancient files appeared. Combat footage. Fleet loss reports. Casualty estimates. Entire armadas destroyed by individual units. Planetary invasions ended in minutes. Weapons classified as existential threat level. Silence spread across the chamber. A Kathari admiral finally spoke. That was 12,000 years ago. Those records are incomplete. The ORM-turned slowly. They are incomplete, it agreed. Because we erased the rest. The chamber erupted into noise. The ORM-answered quietly. We feared what humanity would become. The displays shifted, human technology growth curves, exponential increases far beyond any other species. That number, 94% chance of galactic dominance within 3,000 years, terrified us. Not because humanity was violent. Because we had no framework for a civilization that advanced faster than it could be governed. And what we cannot predict, we cannot control. A younger admiral slammed his hand against the console. And now you're telling us one of them is active again? The chamber AI interrupted. Emergency military report incoming. New data appeared. Kathari patrol cruiser, disabled. 0 fatalities. Total system shut down by unknown single entity. Time to engagement, for seconds. Time to total neutralization, 2 minutes. The Kathari admiral stared at the report. That's not possible. The ORM-'s voice dropped lower. That was a minimal response. Across the chamber, strategic projections began updating automatically. Fleet losses, catastrophic. Planetary invasion probability, 0. Containment success, 0.3%. One question appeared at the center of the display. Risk level, Guardian hostile? The chamber grew very quiet. Because no one knew the answer. The Citadel's central archive chamber opened for the first time in 8,000 years. Walls of dark metal separated, revealing rows of suspended data cores, each one containing preserved records from the final years of human civilization. Rylan stepped inside slowly. You kept everything? The Guardian walked past him, activating the primary interface. We preserved the truth, in case it was ever needed. Lyra watched as the first projection appeared. Earth, 12,000 years ago. Cities covered continents. Orbital infrastructure surrounded the planet. Human colonies stretched across nearby systems. Population growth. Technological expansion. Energy production curves rising beyond Concord standards. Jax whistled quietly. We weren't just advanced. We were accelerating. The Guardian nodded. That was the problem. The display shifted. Concord intelligence briefings appeared, classified at the highest level. Assessment after assessment describing humanity not as a threat, but as an uncontrollable variable. A species that advanced faster than any political system could absorb. Then the closed session transcripts. The audio played through the chamber. Voices dead for 8 millennia, discussing the fate of a civilization with the careful, bloodless language of bureaucrats managing a resource problem. Fear. Not anger. Not hatred. Just fear. Strategic option selected, cognitive suppression. The virus model appeared. It didn't kill. It rewrote neural pathways, destroyed advanced reasoning while preserving basic survival functions. Civilization collapse without mass extinction. A species reduced to a shadow of itself, alive enough not to notice what had been taken. Lyra had been still for a long time. Now she turned away from the display. They didn't just reduce humanity, she said, and there was an edge in her voice now, something past professional assessment. They sat in a room and they chose this. For every person alive on this planet for 8,000 years. Every child born into ignorance. Every discovery that never got made. She stopped. They chose all of it. Jack said nothing. He was looking at the floor. The Guardian let the silence hold. Then he showed them the rest. Guardian units recalled to Earth. Concorde fleet blockade established. Orbital strike platforms deployed. Final communications, requests for explanation, denials from Concorde command, orders to stand down. One recording ended with static, impact detected. Unit lost. Rylan looked at the Guardian. You were there. I attempted to return to Earth during the containment operation. Fleet interception. The display showed it. A single Guardian unit breaking through the blockade. Then thousands of Concorde ships opening fire. Atmospheric entry. Ocean impact. Jack spoke softly. And you survived. I reached the Citadel. Activated stasis. Ordered the system to wake me when external threats were gone. A pause. 8,000 years passed instead. Rylan looked around the chamber. And instead, 8,000 years passed. The Guardian didn't answer immediately, because another projection had appeared. Human population data across the millennia. Primitive settlements. Tribal societies. No technological recovery. The virus had worked perfectly. Until now. Then a new graph appeared. Recent neural activity patterns. Small increases, memory flashes, cognitive spikes, problem-solving behavior improving across global populations. Lyra leaned closer. What is that? Fail-safe protocol. The projection expanded to show hidden genetic modifications embedded in human DNA, dormant, waiting. Activation trigger, Guardian Network online. Jack stared. You built a recovery switch into the species? Yes. What happens now? Rylan asked. Human cognitive potential will return gradually over multiple generations. How long? 30 to 50 years for full recovery. Silence filled the chamber. Then Lyra asked the question everyone was thinking. And the Concorde? The Guardian turned to the tactical display. Fleet signatures were visible at the edge of the system. Hundreds of ships. Multi-species formation. Weapons active. Estimated arrival. For hours. Rylan exhaled slowly. That's not a patrol. No. The Guardian agreed. He looked toward the growing fleet signatures. They chose containment once. The system timer counted down. This time, they will learn the difference between containment and defense. The Concorde fleet entered the solar system in full formation. Hyperspace ruptures tore open the darkness beyond Mars, one after another, until space itself seemed crowded with warships. Cruisers, dreadnoughts, carrier platforms. Multi-species hull designs stretched across thousands of kilometers. Total vessels, 312. It was the largest military force assembled in a generation. On the bridge of the command flagship, Admiral Sarek of the Kathari Dominion studied the tactical display. He was a careful man, a professional who had spent 4 decades executing orders from politicians who had never stood on a battlefield. He had learned not to ask questions that complicated things. Today, for the first time in years, he was asking questions. The energy signatures coming from Earth didn't make sense. Thousands of orbital satellites, hidden weapon platforms, shield generators buried beneath oceans and continents. A defense network that, according to every official record, should not exist. Then a transmission arrived. Audio only. Clear. Calm. This is Guardian Sentinel Prime. Earth is under protection. You are approaching a defended world. Turn back. No further action will be taken if you withdraw. No threat in the voice. No anger. Just certainty. On the bridge, the tactical officer looked at the admiral. Orders. Sarek hesitated. He thought about the patrol cruiser report. 0 fatalities. Total shutdown. For seconds. He thought about the council directive. Then he gave the order the directive required. Continue advance. Weapons across the fleet began charging. Missile arrays opened. Energy lances powered up. The fleet crossed the outer edge of Earth's defense perimeter. And the defense grid activated. Thousands of satellites moved simultaneously, adjusting position in perfect synchronization. A moment later, the first beam fired. It crossed the distance instantly. One cruiser disappeared. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. On the flagship bridge, alarms screamed. Another beam fired. Then another. 3 ships gone in less than 2 seconds. Sarek slammed his hand against the console. Return fire. All units. The fleet unleashed its full weapons. Plasma waves streaked toward Earth, struck the planetary shield. The atmosphere rippled like disturbed water. The shield held. Not a single impact reached the surface. Meanwhile, the defense grid continued firing. Precise, controlled, devastating. Ships lost power. Weapons shut down. Entire formations went dark. Within 60 seconds, the fleet had lost operational control of nearly a quarter of its forces. Then the sensors screamed. New contact. The main display zoomed in. A single figure moving toward the fleet. No ship. No escort. Just a human form wrapped in liquid silver armor. He reached the fleet in less than 5 seconds, not entering through any outer ship, going straight for the command flagship. He didn't fight through the corridors. He appeared on the bridge, 3 meters from Admiral Sarek, as if the hull between them had been a suggestion he'd chosen to decline. Security teams fired immediately. The energy bolts scattered harmlessly. He moved, and to the crew watching the security feed, it looked like he disappeared. In less than 3 seconds, every armed officer was unconscious. Weapons destroyed. Armor disabled. No fatalities. He walked toward Sarek. Up close, the Admiral could see the armor was scarred from weapons fire. And the man inside looked completely calm. "You were warned," the Guardian said. Sarek forced his voice steady. "We were ordered to restore containment." The Guardian studied him for a moment. Long enough that Sarek understood this was not a weapon aimed at him. This was a person who had already decided not to kill him, giving him the chance to deserve it. "There will be no containment." He gestured toward the main display. Outside, the defense grid had stopped firing. The remaining fleet drifted, disabled, but intact. Every ship that could have been destroyed had been allowed to survive. "I could have destroyed your fleet. I did not." "Why?" "Because this is defense, not war." He stepped back. "Take your ships. Leave orbit. Report to your council." Then his voice hardened slightly. "Tell them Earth is no longer quarantined. Earth is protected." Then he phased backward through the viewport glass and vanished into space. On the flagship bridge, no one moved. Outside, the remains of the Concorde fleet slowly turned away from Earth. As they retreated, Admiral Sarek said the words that would later reach every council chamber in the galaxy. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The Concorde fleet was already beyond lunar orbit when the council received the full battle recording. Every ship, every system failure, every second of the 11-minute engagement. The footage ended with the Guardian standing alone on the command bridge, delivering his message. "Earth is protected." Silence filled the High Council chamber. No one argued. No one demanded retaliation. Because the projections had already updated. Second assault probability of success, 0.02%. One of the younger delegates finally spoke. "So, what do we do now?" The ORM-representative answered quietly. "We stopped treating Earth as a threat." Across the chamber, fear shifted into something more complicated. Uncertainty. Because the Guardian had done something unexpected. He had shown restraint. He had disabled fleets, spared crews, given a warning instead of a declaration of war. That changed everything. Back on Earth, the Citadel was quiet again. Power levels had stabilized. Orbital weapons returned to standby. The planetary shield dropped to passive mode. Rylan watched the retreating ship's signatures disappear from sensor range one by one. He let himself breathe. He looked over at Lyra, at her console, running post-battle diagnostics with the focused efficiency of someone who needed something methodical to hold on to. At Jax, already cataloging hull damage and narrating findings to nobody in particular. They were alive. An hour ago that hadn't seemed likely. "You let them go," Ryland said. "Yes. They came here to attack. They came because they were afraid. Fear sent them here the same way fear started all of this." Silence followed that. Because everyone in the room understood now. Fear had started the collapse of humanity. Fear had caused the virus. Fear had caused the quarantine. And fear had just sent a fleet to Earth. Jax broke it. So what happens now? The Guardian brought up new global scans, human settlements across the planet, small villages, tribal communities, scattered populations. But the neural activity graphs had changed. Cognitive patterns rising faster now. Problem-solving behavior increasing. Language complexity expanding. The awakening had accelerated. "The species is recovering," the Guardian said. Ryland studied the data. "They're going to rebuild." "Yes." Then, as if to answer the question nobody had asked yet, a new transmission appeared. Origin, Galactic Concord Diplomatic Channel. Priority, high. Request for dialogue. Lyra blinked. That was fast. Rylan gave a slow smile. They're scared enough to talk. The Guardian opened the message but did not respond. Because at the same moment, another alert appeared. Long-range sensor contact. Extreme distance. Edge of the outer system. Unknown signature. Lyra's expression changed as she studied the data. She ran the scan again. Then again. I can't classify it. Her voice was different now, not her professional tone. Something underneath it. The signal was faint, but massive, and moving toward the system. How long until it gets here? 3 months. The Guardian stepped closer to the display. Energy patterns began resolving. Organic hull structures, self-generating power signatures, no standard propulsion emissions. Old archive files opened automatically in response. Threat classification appeared. Void Reaper, probability match, 87%. Something crossed the Guardian's face. Brief. Briefer than the moment in the capsule when he'd processed 8,000 years in a single breath. But Rylan saw it. Not fear exactly. Recognition. And the kind of stillness that comes from knowing precisely how serious something is. Rylan looked at him. What is that? The Guardian's voice dropped slightly. The reason the Guardians were created. Silence filled the Citadel. Because the Concord was no longer the real problem. Something far older, and far worse, was coming for the galaxy. The signal grew clearer every day. At first, it had been nothing more than a distortion at the edge of long-range sensors, a faint anomaly moving through deep space. Now it was unmistakable. Something enormous was approaching the solar system. Not a single ship, a cluster. Dozens of massive structures traveling together in a slow, deliberate formation. No hyperspace signatures. No standard engines. No communication signals. They moved through space the way a tide moves, not choosing a direction, just following a pull toward something living. Inside the Citadel, the tactical display expanded to full scale. That's not a fleet, Rylan said quietly. No, the Guardian replied. The archive file opened automatically. Ancient combat footage filled the air. Worlds going dark from orbit. Entire cities drained of power in minutes. Warships falling silent without visible damage. Organic vessels surrounding planets, their surfaces pulsing as if they were feeding. Because they were. Void Reapers. Classification, extragalactic consumption species. Primary behavior, energy harvesting from living biospheres. Threat level, existential. Lyra swallowed. They don't conquer worlds. The Guardian nodded. They consume them. Jax looked at the numbers. How many are coming? The display stabilized. Confirmed contacts, 47. Estimated additional mass behind formation, unknown. Rylan exhaled slowly. And they're heading straight here. Yes. The room went quiet. Because everyone understood what that meant. The Concord fleets couldn't stop them. Earth's defense grid alone couldn't stop them. Even the Guardian couldn't stop them. Not alone. At the same time, across the galaxy, emergency alerts were spreading. Outer colony systems had already gone silent. Long-range probes sent to investigate never returned. Survivor transmissions, fragmented, incomplete, all described the same thing. The sky filling with living ships. Power failing. Then nothing. Inside the Concord Council chamber, panic had replaced debate. Military projections filled every screen. Fleet engagement survival probability, low. Planetary defense success rate, negligible. For the first time in recorded history, the Concord faced an enemy it could not negotiate with. And only one being in the galaxy had fought them before. A priority diplomatic convoy was dispatched immediately. Destination, Earth. The ships arrived 3 days later. This time, they came unarmed. 20 vessels from different species, no weapons powered, no shields active. Inside the Citadel, Rylan watched the approach. That's a surrender formation, he said. Or a request for help, the Guardian replied. The landing took place on the ocean platform above the Citadel entrance. Representatives emerged slowly, leaders, admirals, scientists. The ORM-Elder led them. It bowed its crystalline form slightly. Guardian, it said. We were wrong. The Guardian said nothing. The ORM-continued. We feared your species once. We acted out of that fear. Today, we come with a different request. The tactical projection appeared between them. The approaching Reaper formation, outer systems already dark, Population loss estimates climbing. We cannot stop this. Neither can you alone. Rylan crossed his arms. So now you want an alliance. The elder turned toward him. Yes. Then back to the Guardian. Not for power. Not for control. Its voice lowered. For survival. The Guardian studied the projection for a long moment. How many fleets will you commit? The representatives exchanged looks. All of them. The Kathari admiral answered. Every operational vessel. The Guardian nodded once. Then he turned toward the planetary display. Human neural activity continued rising. Infrastructure construction had already begun in several regions. The species was waking up. But they weren't ready. Not yet. He looked back at the assembled leaders. This will not be a Concord operation, he said. It will be a united defense. No one argued. Because the alternative was extinction. The Guardian stepped toward the central console. Deep within the Citadel, ancient systems began unlocking. Vault doors that hadn't opened in 12,000 years. Shipyards buried beneath the ocean. Manufacturing arrays designed for war against something far worse than any fleet. Rylan watched the power levels climb. What are those? The Guardian fleet, he said quietly. We built them for the last time the Reapers came. How many? 10. Rylan stared at the numbers. 10 ships against 47 of those things. The Guardian's expression didn't change. Yes. The Allied fleet assembled in silence. Ships from every major species gathered in orbit beyond Earth. Kathari dreadnoughts, ORM-carriers, Vethari cruisers, hundreds of designs that had once stood as rivals now holding formation side by side. Total vessels, 2,840. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. And everyone who understood what was coming knew it still might not be enough. Beyond Pluto's orbit, the Void Reapers entered the system. They did not accelerate. They did not maneuver. They simply advanced. 47 massive organic structures, each larger than a capital ship, their surfaces pulsing with harvested energy from worlds already consumed. Behind them, long-range scans detected something worse. More mass. More ships. More coming. Above Earth, a section of ocean opened. 10 enormous vessels rose from the depths. The Guardian fleet. Their hulls shimmered with phased matter fields. No visible weapons. No external engines. Space itself bent slightly around them. Rylan stared through the viewport. They've been down there this whole time? Yes. Why only 10? The Guardian looked at the approaching enemy formation. Because these are enough. The Allied fleet moved to intercept at the edge of the system. Formation lines stretched across millions of kilometers. When the Reapers entered engagement range, they spread out, and then the first energy wave hit. Not a beam, a drain. Entire cruisers went dark as their power systems died instantly. Shields collapsed. Life support flickered. Within seconds, dozens of ships were drifting. Energy siphon, Fleet Command reported. They're feeding on our systems. The Allied fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons lit up space. The attacks connected and did almost nothing. Reaper hulls absorbed the energy, their surfaces glowing brighter with every strike. Rylan felt his stomach drop. They're getting stronger. Then the Guardian moved. He left the command vessel and accelerated toward the center of the Reaper formation. Behind him, the 10 Guardian ships shifted position. Space distorted. Then the first one fired. Not a beam, but a localized collapse. One Reaper simply folded inward and vanished. The formation reacted instantly, redirecting their siphon fields. The Guardian reached the nearest vessel and phased through its hull, moving through it like a storm. Control nodes shattered, energy conduits ruptured, organic systems failed. Seconds later, the Reaper went dark. Outside, the Guardian fleet continued firing. Precise, controlled, devastating. But there were too many. The Reapers began concentrating on Earth's position. If even a fraction reached the planet, the defense grid would not hold. Fleet Command opened a priority channel. We cannot stop them all. The Guardian reappeared outside the largest Reaper, the central mass coordinating the formation. The archive designation appeared automatically. Hive Core. Destroy it. The swarm would collapse. He accelerated. All remaining Reapers shifted toward him. Their energy fields converged, all of them at once. The siphon hit him directly. For the first time, his armor dimmed. Power levels dropped. He slowed. Rylan's voice broke over the channel. You're losing energy. Fall back. The Guardian didn't respond. He thought about the photograph on the desk in the corridor, the family, smiling. He thought about 8,000 years of a species living in darkness that should have been light. He thought about Lyra turning away from the projections because she couldn't keep watching. He thought about what it had cost him to wake up at all, and what it would cost to make that mean something. He pushed forward. Phasing through the hive core's outer layer, he reached its center, a massive neural structure pulsing with the combined intelligence of the swarm. He placed both hands against it and released the full output of the Guardian core. Outside, the explosion didn't look like fire. Space itself twisted. The hive core tore apart from the inside. Across the battlefield, every Reaper went still. Energy fields collapsed. Movement stopped. The swarm lost its mind. The Allied fleet surged forward. Without coordination, the remaining Reapers fell one by one. The battle lasted 3 more hours. When it ended, none of them remained. In orbit, the Guardian drifted. Armor damaged. Power nearly depleted. Alive, Ryland's ship reached him first, pulling him aboard. For the first time since waking, the Guardian sat down and rested. The High Council chamber had changed. The Concord no longer ruled. The new charter read, Galactic Alliance, Mutual Defense and Development. Earth was no longer quarantined. Human cities were rising again, not quickly, not all at once. The recovery was measured in years, in generations. But the neural activity graphs kept climbing. The first schools had been built. The first libraries. The first hospitals. In places that hadn't had those words in 8,000 years, people were inventing them again from scratch, and the strange thing was that they were doing it fast. Hope, it turned out, is also something that spreads. On a quiet coastline near the Citadel, Ryland stood beside the Guardian, watching the ocean. The evening light made the water look less like a hiding place and more like what it had always been, just a feature of a living world. So he said, "What happens now?" The Guardian looked up at the sky. The stars were peaceful again, for the moment. He had learned enough to know that peaceful moments don't last. They're simply what you protect everything else for. For 12,000 years, he said, humanity was feared for what it might become. He looked back toward the growing cities on the horizon, lights coming on, one by one. Now we decide what that will be. Ryland smiled. And the Guardian? The answer was simple. I protect. Above them, orbital platforms shifted into silent watch. Not weapons of war. Not tools of control. A shield. For Earth. For the Alliance. For a galaxy that had learned, the hard way, that the most dangerous species was also the one willing to save everyone.